I need you to keep calm, he said. I'm calm, she said. Look at me. Look at me. You will maintain. He stared hard into her eyes. It can't be that bad, she said, slightly exasperated. Johnson. Johnson lost his shit. That Johnson. Mr. I'm a fucking robot Johnson screamed like a little girl, and down here broke into a run. The man took a breath. Do not fuck this up. Calvon was weary. He had been selected as special envoy. It was truly an honor, one he felt he had earned. But, how these humans vexed him. During his initial meeting with the last group, one of the humans had had some sort of outburst, and was carried out by his companions. Calvon was given to believe it had something to do with his appearance. It was not unthinkable that two disparate physiologists should regard each other as somewhat unpleasant, but the humans were fairly benign, looking in his estimation. However, upon entering the meeting room on his last encounter, one of the humans had immediately made a high-pitched squeal and began to shake and point at Calvon and his team. It was then that the human was removed. Calvon worried that the humans found him and his kind hideously ugly. He had noticed that most of the delegates from Terra were tense and had a tendency to be a little jittery. This had not been an issue when the humans were alone. Video of the conference showed it was only while his team was in the room that they acted in such a fashion. He hoped it was just nerves. Perhaps they were hoping to impress during these negotiations. Whatever the reason, they continued to be polite and cooperative. Worst case scenario, they would sign the Accords and keep future contact to a minimum. As long as Calvon's people were safe and happy, that was enough. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! Several deep breaths followed. Calm the fuck down, the man said. I know you warned me, but come on, the woman said between deep breaths. Just keep it together, the man whispered. Calvon Chak, a pleasure to work with you again, he said, as the other party sat at the table. Riek Chak, the pleasure is mine. Let us continue to work to bring our two peoples together harmoniously, Calvon replied with a bow. The human man mashed it and replied, Of course, nothing will make me happier. The two parties sat across from each other and began going over the day's tasks. They have made special accommodations to allow us to dine together. We must attend. The entire delegation has been invited, even the support staff. Calvon spoke to his whole team, assembled in a small meeting hall. This is an informal meeting, and we are not going to waste the generosity or hospitality of our hosts. That being said, be sure to keep in mind that the humans appear to take some issue with our persons, whether it is visual or olfactory, or some other factor. Do not be offended if they act strangely towards you. Simply excuse yourself and leave the room. Understood? Calvon looked over the group. Everyone was nodding in the affirmative. The humans and the Huone were enjoying an evening of music and food. To accommodate the Huone, the room had a plush carpet and cushions spread everywhere. The humans had low tables loaded with culinary delights from both cultures, and drinks were flowing freely. Calvon sat on a cushion covered in a fabric called velvet from the human homeworld. It felt delightful, and he occasionally rubbed it to feel the nap of the textile on his fingertips. He had enjoyed something human food and drink. He had noticed the humans, though still slightly nervous, were not avoiding close proximity to the Huone in the room. So then, he thought to himself, it isn't an olfactory issue. He was saddened that the humans probably thought of him as ugly, but they didn't call attention to it, and the Accords they were working on were generous to both sides. If they were that willing to be allies, Calvon was willing to put up with the fact he was considered homely by them. As the evening progressed, a human female came and sat next to Calvon and the chief human representative. Calvon recognized her from the previous day's talks. After quick reintroductions, the conversation picked back up. Calvon was enjoying his time when suddenly, I'm sorry, Calvon, the woman said. I know this is incredibly rude, and please don't be offended. This is it, Calvon thought, bracing himself for an admission that they found him repulsive. Can I hold you in my lap? The woman asked. Calvon looked at the woman, his jaw hung open. I beg your pardon? He was shocked. I haven't had a chance to play with any of my pets since they aren't allowed on the space station. I know it's a terrible breach of etiquette, but you look so much like my puppy Eli. Sandra, what are you thinking? Calvon Chak, allow me to beg forgiveness for my subordinate's rude behavior. Please, do not allow this breach to affect your views of us. The human delegate bowed deeply. I remind you of a pet? Calvon asked the woman. The man kept his head bowed. The woman just nodded, and her eyes began to get red. She looked a little distressed. Riek, is this why your people act so nervous around us? Riek shot Sandra a look and turned to Calvon. Yes, it is. Your appearance is devastatingly cute to us. I apologize. We've been trying to keep it secret so you would not be offended. You are like rounder, fluffier versions of newborn companion animals from our world. Calvon looked back at the woman. You may hold me in your lap, he said, sitting on his haunches. A modest indignity to build rapport, he thought to himself. The woman's face broke into a broad smile, and she carefully scooped him up in both hands and placed him gently on her lap. Calvon took a moment to situate himself, and then she began to groom him. She ran her hand from the base of his skull all the way down his back. She repeated the motion several times before she realized what she was doing. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. It's a force of habit. I apologize, Sandra said. Calvon, who was initially shocked and perhaps a bit tipsy from drink, turned and said, You may continue. The accord signed and the mission coming to a close, Calvon arrived outside Sandra's suite. He activated the bell, and a moment later the door opened. Sandra welcomed him in. Ever since Sandra and Calvon had shared their time together at the dinner party, more and more humans and Huone had begun to form personal bonds. The human Johnson has spent a great deal of time caring for the fare of several Huone delegates. He was, reportedly, both gentle and thorough in his technique. Sandra, Reed, a pleasure as always, Calvon greeted the two humans, who it turned out were pair-bonded. They greeted Calvon warmly, and the three sat down for a meal. The Huone were initially surprised and slightly bewildered by the events of the Accord Assembly, but given some time to digest it and the myriad requests for home stays, student exchanges, and dozens of offers to attend spa resorts, the Huone were glad to find that humans were almost desperate to form relationships with them. After several hundred years, the two cultures were deeply intertwined. After a millennia or two, they were so well integrated that neither original culture existed anymore. So it was that when the greater galactic community found them, the Human culture was the only known dual sophant symbiotic species, which had originally started as two wholly separate planetary cultures.